AITA for speaking up after I stopped being the golden child. My parents abandoned me once I stopped being perfect. I'm reaching out for some advice, but mostly I need to vent because I'm feeling lost and betrayed. I'm 25 years old, and my entire life has revolved around being my parents' golden child. What happens when that title is ripped away, and you're left standing alone? Here's my story. Growing up, I was the apple of my parents' eyes, Mark and Sarah. They never held back from boasting about me to anyone who would listen. I was the straightest student, the star athlete, and the role model for my peers. I thrived on their praise and affection, believing that as long as I succeeded, I would always have a place in their hearts. Then there was my younger brother Jake, who's now 22. From day one, it felt like he was the family's problem child. While I was excelling in academics and sports, Jake was finding himself in trouble, dabbling in the wrong crowd, and struggling to meet our parents' expectations. I could see the disappointment etched on their faces whenever they looked at him, and though I felt guilty for being the favored child, it was hard not to relish the attention. As I hit my teenage years, the pressure to perform increased exponentially. I joined the debate team, became class president, and even held a part-time job to help with family finances. Every accolade brought me closer to my parents but also pushed me into a constant state of anxiety. I remember nights spent crying over textbooks, feeling the weight of their expectations on my shoulders. Jake, on the other hand, felt increasingly isolated. He would often turn to me for support, but I was so consumed with my own pressure that I couldn't fully be there for him. I noticed the gap widening between us as my parents continued to shower me with love and validation while criticizing his every misstep. It was like living in a pressure cooker, where I felt obligated to maintain the status quo. When I turned 18, I decided to apply to a prestigious university, hoping to fulfill what I believed was my destiny. My parents were over the moon, practically planning my graduation party before I even got accepted. Their excitement fueled me to push harder, but I felt increasingly detached from my own desires. I realized I was living out their dream rather than my own. Finally, during my first semester of college, I had a moment of clarity. I was miserable, drowning in a sea of law textbooks that I had no passion for. One night, after a long day of classes and work, I sat in my dorm room, tears streaming down my face as I contemplated my future. I knew that I had to make a choice: either continue down this path for my parents or follow my heart and pursue a career in writing. The next family dinner, I finally summoned the courage to break the news. "Mom, Dad, I want to study creative writing instead of law," I declared, my voice shaking. Their reaction was instantaneous. The air in the room shifted from jovial to tense. I could see their faces fall, and the warmth of the room turned icy. "What do you mean? We've invested so much time and money into your future," Dad barked, his tone laced with disbelief. "You can't just throw that away." My heart sank. It felt like I was asking for permission to breathe. "I know you want what's best for me, but I'm not happy. I want to write, not practice law." My mom's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sympathy. "This isn't what we envisioned for you, and it's disappointing," she whispered, her disappointment palpable. That conversation shattered something in me. I realized that their love came with conditions, and those conditions hinged on my success. In the weeks that followed, the distance between us only grew. I switched my major to creative writing, and while I found a sense of freedom, my parents turned their backs on me. They stopped reaching out, and when they did, the conversations were terse and filled with tension. The golden child had fallen from grace, and I was left feeling isolated. Jake and I had always been close, but his struggles intensified during this period. He felt the pressure of being the bad child even more keenly, and I found it hard to help him while dealing with my own issues. One evening, I received a desperate call from him, asking if we could meet at our old coffee shop. I arrived to find him looking drained and anxious, his usual spark extinguished. "Why do they hate me?" he asked, tears streaming down his face. "I just want them to be proud of me, but it feels like no matter what I do, it's never enough." My heart ached for him. I wanted to tell him that he was enough just as he was, but I was wrestling with my own feelings of inadequacy. We spent hours talking, sharing our experiences of being raised under the shadow of parental expectations. It became clear that we were both suffering, but instead of supporting each other, we were stuck in our respective roles, the golden child and the black sheep. It was a toxic cycle that we desperately wanted to break. That day, we made a pact we would confront our parents together. It was a daunting decision, but we couldn't remain silent any longer. I was tired of tiptoeing around their feelings, and Jake deserved to be heard. We wanted to share how their favoritism had fractured our relationship and hurt us both. Finally, the day arrived when we sat our parents down in the living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "Mom, Dad, there's something we need to talk about," I began, my heart racing. "It's about how you've treated us over the years and the pressure you've put on us." Their expressions shifted from curiosity to defensiveness. Dad folded his arms, a protective gesture that made my stomach churn. "What do you mean?" "We've always been proud of both of you," he replied, but his voice was strained. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my words. "But you've compared us constantly. You've made it clear that I'm the golden child and Jake is the disappointment. That's not fair to either of us. We're individuals with our own dreams and aspirations, and it feels like you only love us when we're meeting your expectations." Jake chimed in, his voice trembling but resolute. "I can't take it anymore. I feel like I'm not allowed to fail or make mistakes without facing your disappointment. It's exhausting. I just want to be loved for who I am." Their reaction was explosive. Mom's face turned crimson as she shouted, "How dare you both say that? We've sacrificed everything for you two." Her words cut deep, and it was as if she had dismissed our feelings without a second thought. The argument escalated, emotions running high as we each expressed years of pent-up frustration. Dad's voice rose in anger, and for the first time, I felt like I was fighting for my existence. "You think you can just walk away from the plans we made for you? You're throwing your future away." The pain in my chest deepened as I saw the denial in their eyes. They were unwilling to acknowledge how their expectations had shaped our lives, and it felt like we were fighting a losing battle. I could feel the tears stinging my eyes, but I fought them back. Eventually, I stormed out, Jake trailing behind me. We ended up at the park, sitting on a bench under the stars. "I can't believe they reacted that way," he said, his voice cracking. "I thought they'd understand." "I thought so too," I replied, my voice barely a whisper, "but I'm done trying to please them. We deserve to be heard, and they need to face the reality of what they've done to us." In the months that followed, things took a turn for the worse. My parents completely cut off communication, and I felt the void in my life grow. I focused on my writing, pouring my heart into a collection of essays about family dynamics, love, and the impact of favoritism. Writing became my refuge, my safe space where I could explore my emotions without judgment. Then one day, I received an email from a publisher expressing interest in my essays. My heart raced as I read the words. I was ecstatic but also terrified. What if my parents found out? Would they be proud or furious? The thought of their reaction weighed heavily on my mind, but I decided to move forward with my work. When my collection was published, I included a chapter addressing my family dynamics. I detailed the emotional toll their favoritism had taken on me and how it impacted my relationship with Jake. I hoped that by sharing my story, I could help others who felt unseen and unworthy, just as I have felt for so long. After the launch, I braced myself for the backlash from my parents. To my surprise, I received an outpouring of support from friends and even distant relatives. Many reached out to tell me how much my story resonated with them, sharing their own experiences with family expectations and pressures. A few days later, my parents called me. I was shocked to see their names on my phone. "We'd like to talk," Dad said, his tone surprisingly calm. My heart raced as I agreed to meet them, unsure of what to expect. When we sat down together, I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. "We read your book," Mom said, her eyes downcast. "And we didn't realize how much we hurt you and Jake. We were caught up in our expectations and didn't see how it affected our relationship." I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. I just want us to be honest with each other, I replied, my voice steady. We're not perfect, and it's okay to admit that we've made mistakes. Their apologies were heartfelt, and for the first time, I could see genuine remorse in their eyes. They acknowledged their shortcomings and promised to work on being better parents, ones who supported us as individuals rather than as reflections of their dreams. Jake and I slowly rebuilt our relationship with our parents, taking small steps toward healing. We started having regular family dinners where we could talk openly about our feelings without judgment. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Jake flourished in his music career, and I continued to grow as a writer. Our parents began to support us in ways they hadn't before, attending Jake's shows and promoting my writing. I learned to forgive, not for their sake, but for my own peace of mind. I realized that I didn't need to carry the weight of their expectations any longer. I was carving out my own identity, and it felt liberating. The road to rebuilding our relationship wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I discovered that family is not just about blood. It's about support, love, and acceptance. My parents may have faltered in their parenting, but they were willing to learn and grow. Today, I'm proud of the person I've become. I've embraced my writing career, and I no longer seek validation from my parents. Instead, I focus on surrounding myself with people who uplift me and inspire me to be my true self. Jake and I are closer than ever, often collaborating on projects that blend our talents. We've created a supportive environment for one another, and it's beautiful to see how far we've come. In sharing my story, I hope others can find strength in their struggles and know that it's never too late to break free from the chains of expectation. Remember, your worth isn't defined by anyone else, it's found within yourself.